Welcome to the Bodum Group. Marina Bodum here, and today I'm hanging out with my good friend Anna. She is a property manager in the upstate area, and we're going to discuss what it takes to be a landlord. So we recently went to market with a few more of our investment properties. We will include a link with this video if you guys are interested to check out our current inventory. So without further ado, Miss Anna, if you'd like to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your experience. How many years have you been doing property management, and how many properties are under your leadership as of now?
Yeah, so hello, I am Anna. I have been doing property management for coming up here on 7 years. I have been very lucky to work at a company where I have seen substantial growth. Right about now, I'm at 450 properties.
Oh, wow.
Well, that is 450 units, not properties. And yeah, I have seen very, very big growth within our upstate. And I recently got a question actually, should I still build in Spartanburg County? Yes. The rental market isn't going anywhere in Spartanburg County. We are just growing, and that's, I feel like, where our economy is headed to.
Okay. So what type of investment properties do you guys have? Mainly duplexes, townhomes, homes?
So we particularly specialize in townhomes and duplexes. So something that is going to be different from your apartment complex.
Okay.
You don't have anybody above you. You don't have anybody below you. You still have your own space, even though it is a rental. You always have a backyard. You always have a porch. So we definitely specialize more in private homes versus an apartment complex where they're kind of clustered.
So would you, for those who are looking to build investments, you said this is a great growing market. Would you recommend building townhomes versus apartment complexes?
Especially for the first-time investor, yes.
Okay.
Because how are you supposed to invest in an entire apartment complex when you don't have a cash flow? However, you could start off with 2, then 4, and so forth until you get to a point where you can build a large community.
Okay. Well, as from a property management perspective, is it easier to rent out a townhome versus an apartment?
In my opinion, yes.
Okay.
I also think the clientele, the tenants, are much better in those types of homes.
Okay. So yeah, on that note, you said better tenants. Is there a certain screening software that you use or certain requirements that ensures that you have good quality tenants?
So we particularly use a system called Appfolio. It is very wonderful. However, you do have to have 50 plus properties in order to start with it.
Okay.
But through there is where we do all of our screening. Now, our personal requirements, we do require a credit score, a certain income, clean background, of course, and no prior evictions. The credit score is a 600 minimum, and the income is 3 times the rent amount. But as your own private landlord, you can adjust that to whatever you'd like it to be. I know a lot of people do a 750 credit score and so forth.
So on that note, having those requirements, does that reduce your amount of evictions you guys have seen over the years, and long-term tenants actually staying there versus moving out after half a year and actually enjoying their experience?
So yes and no.
Okay.
Yes, as in people with a good credit score are most likely going to pay their rent on time. I have seen situations where someone's overqualified and then life happens. But also you have to consider renting to somebody that is qualified to rent from you is also qualified to buy a home. Everyone's long-term goal is to buy a home. So those tenants aren't necessarily going to be long-term.
Okay.
Sometimes it's the iffier tenants that do stay the longest, and they always pay rent on time. Sometimes you have to give a chance to people, but that's just the name of the game.
Yeah, no, of course. You're talking about long-term tenants. Is it more beneficial to have a tenant stay for a year or 5 years? For instance, let's say they have a 1-year lease and you want to raise rent. Do you see it as a bigger benefit to have short-term tenants? In that case, since like our market is growing, rental rates are increasing, would you be able to raise rent if you have a 1-year lease, or?
So rental increases can happen anytime you run out of your lease. So when you sign a lease, you're locked in for that price for the year, and after the year, you can pick up your rent.
Is there a maximum on that? Like you can only raise rent X amount? Okay.
There is no max. That is guided by law. Of course, you have to be reasonable. If you're going to pick up your rent by $500, most likely your tenants can't afford it and won't stay. For a large landlord,
Mm-hmm.
it is possibly more beneficial to have shorter term tenants just because you're able to go in and do turnovers on those units and
Mm-hmm.
remodel, do what you need to do to upkeep your property.
But isn't it a higher cost to
Well,
go
so
in
what-
and remodel
that's
every
what I was
year?
going to say. With the bigger landlord, you can definitely afford it.
Mm-hmm.
For a small landlord, someone with 2 or 4 duplexes, you might be just better off keeping your rent the same than spending several $1,000s.
Upkeeping
Because
it,
you
yeah.
picked up your rent and you were going to make an extra $500 for the year, but now
Mm-hmm.
you've spent $1,000 on the remodel, an extra $300 on a cleaning fee, plus
Mm-hmm.
this, plus that, plus vacancy time, plus maybe possibly paying a leasing agent to
Mm-hmm.
find a new tenant. So
Well, you're talking about upkeeping your rentals. If the tenants do not move out, are you still able to enter the unit and do remodels or repaint or what exactly?
you can, but why
Okay.
would you want to?
Okay. I mean, that's a decent question. I mean, doing actual yearly inspections to ensure there's nothing wrong with the unit.
Yearly
and things are-
inspections, I
okay.
would suggest to make sure that there's no water damage in the walls.
Mm-hmm.
But if someone is perfectly happy with gray walls, why are you going to come in and repaint them pink?
That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned that AppFolio requires you to have at least 50 properties, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Are there other software out there for, first-time investors who have, 1 to 5 rentals and just kind of want to have something to help manage things versus doing everything on their own?
Yeah, so there is a system called Buildium as well. I've had a little bit experience with that one. Not as good as AppFolio in my opinion, but it is guided more toward smaller landlords. I'm sure there's other softwares. But again, if someone only has 6 properties, I would suggest making a spreadsheet and doing
not
that
paying
for
that,
free
yeah.
just because it would be easier and more cost effective for you because at that rate, you need you need as much income as you can get.
Okay, that makes sense. So a lot of our investors are going to be first-time investors, and let's say we have a buyer who purchases a duplex. They live on one side and have a renter on the other side. Would you recommend hiring a property manager for something like that if you 1 to 4 units, or would you just recommend doing it on your own? I know you mentioned like it's cost effective to just do things on your own, but as far as like a liability standpoint, do you think it's worth it even getting a property manager?
Worth it? Yes. Should you? Not necessarily.
Okay.
It really depends on the type of person. If you're able to keep up with it and you're able to keep up with the maintenance and the rent payments and everything else, and for lack of better terms, you're competent enough to read the law and understand it, by all means do it yourself. Because again, you need your cash flow to be as high as possible. If you are worried about the Landlord-Tenant Act and not following the laws and things like that, either have a very handy contact that you can call and ask questions or hire a property manager, because at the end of the day, you're not treated like a property manager because you're not licensed, but you're still upheld by the Landlord-Tenant Act.
Which that's a good question, I feel like, to touch on. So if you are not a property manager, let's say you're listing your rental for lease, are there certain requirements, you know what I mean, that kind of don't apply to you being a landlord? I know you mentioned, if you're managing a large amount of rentals, everything has to be uniform, the same across the board. If they're your own personal properties, is there wiggle room as to like what you require, what?
So at any rate, you could set your standards, but I would recommend setting those standards exactly the same for every single thing that you do. Doesn't matter if you have 2 units, if you have 4, if you have just the one that's next door to you, unless it's your mom or dad or your relative that you're making an exception for, just because people are crazy nowadays and anyone and everyone's
just
looking
wanna
to
be sure.
report you and to sue you. So
Okay.
just out of caution, I would.
Just go ahead and have a standard across the board. As far as writing a lease, is there a South Carolina standard property management lease, or is that something you have attorneys draw up?
You can write it up yourself on a piece of napkin.
Really?
There's
Okay.
only one snippet from the Landlord-Tenant Act that you have to include, and that is that eviction clause. that is stated in the Landlord-Tenant Act, but you could write it yourself. It doesn't have to be super exuberant. Put it in there, whatever you want your tenant to follow. If it's not in there, good luck saying that you told them.
So what I'm hearing is make sure everything's in writing. It doesn't have to be
Everything's in writing.
extensive, but it is easier if you go to court. So speaking of evictions, let's talk a little bit about that process. Let's say a tenant's not paying. How long do you typically wait before you file an eviction on them?
So by law, by that little snippet from the Landlord-Tenant Act, you have to give them 5 days after your grace period.
Okay.
If you have a grace period.
What's a typical grace period?
So typically a grace period is 5 days. So your very standard lease is going to be rent is due on the 1st, grace period till the 5th. So they have the 5 days to make that rent payment.
Okay.
They are late if they are on the 6th. You can set your late fees. You could do daily, you could do a percentage, you could do a flat fee. However you want to calculate it. I know of a company that did $100 per day.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So a little bit ridiculous. However, if you want to ensure that people are paying on time, that could be
does
something
motivate
to
them,
consider.
yeah.
And then 5 days after the grace period would be the 10th. So on the 11th, you're more than welcome to march down to the courthouse and file.
How long does the eviction process typically take?
So right now, it's anywhere between 30 to 45 days. Our current process in Spartanburg County just changed a little bit. It's changed since COVID times. But yeah, somewhere around there, and it really depends on the courthouse's schedule. Sometimes we're able to get tenants out within 30 days. We've had situations where they were in there for almost 3 months.
Oh, wow. So I know during COVID, courthouses were closed. Is this something that would be affected by a situation like that? Or were they able to do, evictions via Zoom?
So
How
we
that
did
work?
eviction court Zoom during
Oh,
Zoom. Yeah,
wow,
when
okay.
we had the moratorium, obviously everything was shut down. But then once everything picked up, I want to say it was either May or June. We did evictions through Zoom.
Oh, wow.
It was great.
Made it a lot easier, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but also they've changed up their process. Now, it used to be where when you got filed on, you had a court date set and you had to show up as the landlord and as the tenant. Now, Spartanburg County does where if we file eviction, the tenant has to request a court date. If they do not request a court date by a certain day that is written on their eviction notice, we automatically get to win and we have the writ. So we can go ahead and shut them out.
So our last question is going to be, is there a specific property management horror story that you would like to share with us, just for laughs and giggles?
Sure. So one particular story stands out. We had a duplex. We are getting complaints from the neighbor that there's a smell.
Okay.
And the tenant that was in there, she was really nice. Started paying on time. Things started off great. And then all of a sudden she was behind. She was this, she was that. This happened, that happened, this person died, whatever. Like I said, life happens. And so we're getting complaints from like the next door neighbor that it smells. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're going to have to send the police and do a welfare check because what if she died? Like if the smell is seeping into the next door unit,
That's
how
room for
that-
concern, yeah.
So I was like, we have the eviction in process. We can't just enter the home, but the police can. The neighbors go next door to see what happens. They were like, oh, the door was open.
So they just went in, but okay, wow.
So they sent me pictures.
Uh-huh.
This girl, it looked like a big dog. The dog was gone. However, there was room, and she had the dog just go to the bathroom in the room. She then pulls up the carpet, rolls it up, and then the dog proceeds to...
Like the physical carpet, not like a rug that you put on top of
the carpet
it.
that comes with the
wow,
property, yeah. Rolls it up, and he continues to poop all over the concrete. And then the laundry room was also the same mess. We don't have carpet in there. He ate the walls. Like chunks of the wall was missing. I mean, it looked like it was a big dog.
Oh my goodness. So did she just move out without letting you guys know?
Yeah,
or,
well,
and
she
just,
was in the process of eviction, and what happens
Okay.
a lot of times, people just leave.
Oh my
But
goodness.
my gosh.
So repair-wise, was it really difficult to get that repaired afterwards, or?
So we have a good team. We have a good system. It was hard to get rid of the smell.
Oh wow.
However, we have tenants in there now. Nobody ever complained. We took care of it. We have our tips and tricks that we do, but we had to paint the concrete to just suffocate the smell because it was seeped into the concrete.
Wow, that's crazy. So,
That's probably one of the worst ones, but we see weird stuff all the time.
which I guess that is the benefit of hiring a property management company versus doing it on your own. You kind of have an ability to handle situations like that a lot easier. And
Well, sometimes I'll get like your small landlords call me and they're like, "Oh my gosh, there was this mess. They left their table. It's a table, throw it out." Like, it's really not that big of a deal. When you can fix it yourself, it's fine.
okay.
There's
Well,
always worse.
yes. Well, Anna, thank you for joining us. It was a pleasure having you on our
You're
podcast
welcome.
today.
It's always good to see you.
Yep. You guys subscribe to our channel if you want more information on how to be an investor and manage your rental properties.